Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We love to see you. We are so grateful to everyone who joins the show. Also, want to give a special shout out to people who have become Patreon supporters. We are so close to 1,000 Patreon supporters. In fact, let me just go put the patreon.com/the Katie Halper Show in my name. Patreon.com/the Katie Halper Show. Okay. Now, I want to thank some recent Patreon supporters, because we're so close. I think we're at 997. What I would love to get is, by the end of this show, if we have 1,000 Patreon supporters, I'll be so happy. And again, no one gets rich off of this. We pay for editing, for production costs, and to give you also a show that's free. Because again, this show, we give you weekly content that's free in audio and video. And then we give you exclusive content that's paywalled, but it's a show that everyone can listen to. And of course, if you can be Patreon supporters, you get even more show. But it's something I'm very proud of, that we offer this show for free for everyone. And we offer kind of like an extra show that people can pay some money towards. So I'm being a responsible citizen. I'm closing my other applications, which Brad reminded me to do. So hi, Brad. Hi, Tyler. And everyone, just so you know, this is the Katie Halper Show, which we do live Sundays and Tuesdays right here from YouTube. And you can support the show on YouTube. You can become members. And if you become members, you get like Bodhi emojis and you get badges. And if you are a Patreon supporter, you get extended interviews and extra interviews. And you can also, please subscribe. Just hit subscribe. Do yourself that favor and hit subscribe. Hit subscribe and then the bell so that you get notified when my shows come on, although that doesn't always work, which is annoying and scary, and I don't know what's behind that. And make sure that you like. Oh, yes, please like the stream. Like whenever you're watching a show, just hit the thumbs up. It's so easy. It's just a good way to do the right thing. And this is the Katie Halper Show. We are live. I'm looking at your comments that are coming in. And I want to say hi to everyone. Now, as I promised, I was going to read some Patreon supporters. So let's go. Let's read some recent Patreon supporters. Hold on. Let's do new. All right. Here's some new Patreon supporters. Ready? Wow, we got a lot lately. We got so many. And guys, if you become Patreon supporters now, this episode, you'll have your name read out loud. Thank you so much to Mordecai, great name, Benjamin, Hannah, Marvin, Simone, Laura, Michelle, Conrad, Sarah with an A and no H at the end, Mary, Robert, Eva with an E, Ahmed, Michael, Robert, Patrick, Bags, anyone, Strings, Eric, Rebecca, Clopsy, Eugene, Lauren, Matt, Carol. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for helping make the show possible. Everyone who's a Patreon supporter makes the show possible. If you give at $5, you get extra amazing content. And if you give but even if you just give at $1, you help make the show possible. Mason, Rahima, yes, Jesse, Nawal, Eugene. Yes, thank you guys so much. Really, you helped make the show happen. Timothy. Yeah. Tibor, Catherine, Helen. So keep doing it. Keep making the show happen. We really appreciate it. And let's see. And everyone, let's see. Support the show to resist corporate information trying to pass as news. Katie Halper is a gift. Thank you so much, Reverend. Thank you. I'll give you an amen for that one. So what we're going to do today is what we're going to do today. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so distracted. 1 second. All right. You know, it's hard booking shows. Let me tell you something. That wasn't for this show. All right. Possibly better to reboot the stream. What's going on? I'm really distracted today. I'm sorry. This is another cool thing about getting these notifications because I'm cutting this out. People who are not live do not get to see me being totally distracted at the beginning of the show. Who's saying possibly better to reboot the stream? Is there something happening with the stream? Your video? Okay. Yeah. Why is my video? Hold on one second. It's flashing orange, my connection, my Ethernet connection. That's the thing. I'm Etherneted in. Hold on. How's my connection now? I turned off my Wi-Fi. Am I still on? If I am, that means it's through the Ethernet. Am I on still? I am, right? So this is my Ethernet connection. Okay. Is it any better or is it the same? Oh, it's better. Interesting. Damn you, Wi-Fi. Okay, let me just log out of all other. I don't need to have my Zoom program open, for instance. Zoom should not be open. And I have a very bad case of tabitis. So let me close my tabs. All right. Yeah, I was thinking that we should have that person on, actually. All right, one second. And I'm also going to start doing that show Call-In, which will be good. So everyone download the app Call-In, and I know you can't get it on Droids. Hold on. This is fun. Like, honestly, you love to see this. Not everyone will do this stuff on live, not television, live stream. This totally disorganized, but this is just one of the perks of watching the show live as opposed to later. You know, I could just cut away and start the stream because I have something pre-taped to start off with, but I feel like I need to be honest about what's going on over here. All right, let's see. Comments. We got some comments. All right. So here is thank you so much for saying that you love it. Thank you. Love your intros live. Thank you. How do I get Call-In app? If you have an iPhone, you just literally look for Call-In. Callin, and that's what happens. That's what you do. So here's the deal. As people know, I responded, Daniel Bessner and I, maybe you don't know this, but we pre-taped, we responded to Whoopi Goldberg statements, and I'm gonna play those for you. Then we're gonna have a guest. I don't even want to tell you who the guest is, but I'm gonna tell you who the guest is because you're gonna get excited. Added to the stream is none other than Briahna Joy Gray. I mean, how exciting is that? Really exciting. So Briahna Joy Gray is going to be joining us in the later half of the show. In fact, I should tweet that out. But right now, here's the deal. Whoopi Goldberg said some stuff the other day on the View, and she got into trouble. The Anti-Defamation League is mad at her. Meghan McCain is mad at her. Some people who aren't assholes are also mad at her because what she said was, I think, a little insensitive and problematic. So I responded. I watched what she said with Daniel Bessner. Daniel Bessner is an historian. And he is an intellectual historian, which makes it a great fit, a particularly good fit. He is the host of the American Prestige podcast, and he's also a professor at the University of Washington. At the University of Washington, yeah. He's Hanauer Honors Associate Professor of History at the University of Washington. So without any further ado, let's just go full screen. I think that's better, or we can do like a meta thing where I'm watching it, which is better. So excited to be bringing Daniel Bessner back onto this. How's that? Everyone, can everyone hear that? Am I playing that correctly, Brad, or should I be? Yes, okay. So let's watch this. This is meta. Onto the show. He is I'm going to call him for this appearance a Jew-storian.
I am a historian who has studied the Jews extensively. Yes, ma'am.
And you happen to be, not that it matters, or maybe it does, but you happen to be a Jew yourself.
Yes. What gives it away?
I don't know. That Jewish je ne sais quoi, that je ne sais quoi. Well,
that's good. I like that.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about an appearance that a whole, some Michigas, if you will. I'll tone it down a little bit, but there was
definitely Michigas
with Whoopi Goldberg, not Jewish, by the way. Goldberg is not her real last name.
No.
But we're going to be talking about a recent controversy that was ignited when Whoopi Goldberg made some comments about Jews and the Holocaust. So let's play the initial clip of what happened with Whoopi Goldberg on her show, The View, which she's on and she also produces.
And a Tennessee school pulled the graphic novel Mouse out of their lessons on the Holocaust because it contained some nudity and some bad language. Personally, I'm shocked because, you know, given the story of Mouse, I'm surprised that that's what made you uncomfortable. The fact that there was some nudity and I mean, it's about the Holocaust, the killing of 6 million people, but that didn't bother you. But the naked.
I'm not sure that they don't use the naked part as a kind of a canard to throw you off from the fact that they don't like history that makes white people look bad.
And Joy Behar, by the way, not Jewish, major Jew cultural appropriation, almost honorary.
Is she is of Italian descent, right?
She is of Italian descent, and that raises.
So she's New York. She's New York.
I think of Italians as kind of butch Jews, or Jews as kind of intellectual Italians. Sorry, I'm going to get canceled on both ends for that.
Well, she definitely has a New York aesthetic, which I think can cross ethnic groups.
And she does like Jewish men. I think her husband is Bayer. I think she had a crush on Bernie. Not that she was supportive of him politically, but I think she said she had a crush on that man.
Bahar sounds Israeli. Almost.
Oh my gosh, is she married to Israeli? Could it be?
I have no idea. But Bahar
Joy,
sounds
let us
Israeli,
know.
Yeah.
Let us know. It sounds Beshert that you were. Was it Beshert that you married him?
This is white people doing it to white people.
Yeah.
So this is, you know, y'all go fight amongst yourselves, but don't, you know.
Well, and look at what. As a kind of a canard to throw you off from the fact that they don't like history that makes white people look bad.
Well, this is white people doing it to white people.
Yeah.
So this is, you know, y'all go fight amongst yourselves, but don't, you know.
So that's like the first hint that about how she's framing this issue as the Holocaust and anti-Semitism as kind of white on white. We'll keep playing it, right? We should keep playing it because there's a lot to get into, but that's the first.
Yeah, so I think what we see throughout this video is the application of an American idiom of race and the history of racism onto the Holocaust, which was really a European event.
Right.
And that's something we could talk about more and more, but you know, the term race means different things in different contexts. And I think a lot of what Whoopi does, and from what I've seen this video and the other one, that's a lot of what we're exploring here.
Right. That's good. Yeah. So the difference between the kind of European idiom or language around this and the American.
What kids watch these days and the music they listen to say that when proving or showing them a work of history or art or something that happened is bad language or nudity, turn off reality TV, turn off the radio, turn off everything they're doing, because kids are exposed to this stuff really early in inappropriate situations, not ones where you're learning or teaching.
Yeah, and the nudity is a drawing of his mom who died during the Holocaust. I mean, in Mouse, which is the other thing. It's just insane.
But I don't know what.
And Mouse is a graphic novel about a graphic autobiography by Art Spiegelman.
But it's about his father, whose name I believe was Vladek Spiegelman, who met Art Spiegelman's parents. Met before the Holocaust, and they both actually survived the Holocaust, if I recall correctly, and experienced Auschwitz. And Spiegelman's mother later committed suicide. So the book is really a meditation on both the literal Holocaust and the American Jewish experience as it emerged in a post-Holocaust world. And that really is what the book is about. So on one hand, a memoir of the Holocaust. Spiegelman is telling his father's story, but he's also telling his own story and how the first post-Holocaust generation of American Jews relate to that event.
Right. The children of survivors, especially.
There's an entire bill moving through the Florida legislature right now about banning any conversation in schools that make people feel uncomfortable because of their race or gender. And there's also in Florida a bill banning talking about LGBTQ conversations. It's being referred to as "Don't Say Gay." So I don't know what's happening with all of this banning going on. You know, we talked about Beloved being banned, Mao's To Kill a Mockingbird. Mockingbird, conversations. I think it's making it very difficult to teach kids. And all these people who talk about and complain about people being snowflakes, how do you not raise snowflakes if you don't expose them to reality?
Right? This was the plan with these anti-history laws that started being passed, these alleged CRT laws that started being passed. I don't think people saw far enough into the future. You start banning discussions about race, then you start banning discussions about the Holocaust, then you start banning discussions about the LGBTQ community. That's where it started, and this was all very planned, and in my view. And what bothers me the most is people saying, I don't want my children to be uncomfortable.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that colleges, this all started in colleges and universities and not wanting to make kids uncomfortable. And we talked about it once here on the show with actually Van Jones when he said, if I send my kids to school, I want them to be uncomfortable. I want people to push back on their beliefs because otherwise we're not preparing kids to go out into the real world. We're preparing them for a world that doesn't exist outside of their own.
Katie, can I just pause on that for a second? So I just want to address myself to that issue. Because is she a conservative? I'm not familiar with. So she's the conservative. That argument to me is very silly because what has actually happened is that universities have become spaces that rely on tuition dollars. And like the rest of the country, when you pay for something, you expect a service. So it's always compelling to me that people who argue for the defunding of public education or free market politics, which have helped result in universities costing an incredible amount and students going into debt, make arguments about as universities are these places where students are supposed to be made to feel comfortable. When universities just don't function that way any longer, that ideal of the university as Athens is just no longer accurate. They're businesses, they're very corporatized, and students are customers. Basically, due to the politics and policies of this, of someone who I presume, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a free marketeer and who's very much about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps to borrow the famous phrase. Yet at this time, lamenting that universities aren't spaces for free exchange when it's the very politics that caused that. It's just a bitter irony and kind of makes me turn off when I hear these sorts of conversations.
This otherwise very intellectually serious person. Yeah. Sadly, yeah. Okay. So
well, also, if you're going to do this, then let's be truthful about it, because the Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race.
Ethnicity.
No,
I like how everyone took a pause on that one.
It's not about race.
Yeah,
because
you can tell
it's
the
about
temperature in that room
man's
changed.
inhumanity to man. That's what it's about.
But it's about white supremacy. It's about
but
going
it's not.
after
It's
Jews
not about
ideal race.
But these are two.
you know what? Shout out to Anna Navarro, the Contra defender that she is, and daughter of a Contra that she is, for actually acknowledging that the Holocaust went after people we now call the Roma. Because a lot of people don't acknowledge that it was more than Jews. I mean, Jews were like the star of the Holocaust, if you will. But because that was like the priority in terms of who should be wiped out. But there were many other groups that were allegedly impure and a threat to the Aryan race.
Yes, Slavs, Roma, homosexuals, and this is actually has been a long discussion in Holocaust studies.
Yes,
is sort of to what degree does one privilege the Jews within the Holocaust, and to what degree it does not privileging the Jews actually distract from the primacy of the Jews to the Nazi imagination. It's a very complex debate.
It is, and there's also a lot of useful like internationalism and solidarity that can come from universalism, I should say, universalism, not internationalism per se, universalism, because it's a reminder that, part of the Nazi project was the Nazis were interdisciplinary. They were multicultural in their aims.
It was the purification of Europe defined in a sort of complex way, with the Jews identified as the major enemy, but with other ethnic groups and other, I don't want to use the word race because that's what we're going into, but other racial groups and other ethnic groups also forming a part of sort of the purification program that the Nazis wanted to accomplish.
Right. It was hilarious when, by the way, Donald Trump, his administration on Holocaust Remembrance Day, like they didn't mention Nazis, and they tried or Jews, and then they tried, and because it was like just the worst of all worlds, like basically, not wanting to alienate anti-Semites, but also being totally, terrible on Israel. And when I say terrible on Israel, I mean totally hawkish, Zionist, anti-Palestinian. And they actually defended it in some funny way that, like, they sounded like sound like when I talk about the Holocaust, when I say it's not just Jews. Like they were trying to downplay it. But of course, it's very Jewish specific. It just wasn't only Jews. But it was hilarious to hear them talk about it in that way.
And Jared's grandparents were Holocaust survivors.
Right,
I believe.
right.
Yeah.
White groups of people.
Well,
How
they
do
were after black
They
people
didn't see
too.
them as white people.
And they were
But you're
after
missing the
homosexuals.
point. You're missing the point. The minute you turn it into race, it goes down this alley. Let's talk about it for what it is. It's how people treat each other. It's a problem. It doesn't matter.
I mean, if that's true, but that the same then can be said about slavery.
Yeah, she's just basically applying the American idiom where this, because this is interesting because it gets into questions of to what degree are Jews white. So before we even get into that question, we have to acknowledge that not all Jews are of European descent. There's Mizrahim, there's Jews of, Central European descent, Ashkenazi Jews. There's Jews of Sephardic descent. There's Jews of Ethiopian descent, and there's other populations around the world. Apologies if I didn't mention every single one. But in the United States,
and there are Ashkenazi Jews of color.
And and they're Jews of color as well, which I'm just talking about the huge national origins. And then there's intermixing with all of those groups with various other groups. There's Jews of colors, there's Jews of African American descent and Latinx descent and what have you. So first of all, not all Jews are white, but I think in the American imagination, I'm not actually precisely aware of the numbers of Jews who identify as white Ashkenazim. The question is, to what degree are Jews white? And the way that there's a lot of different discussions. Some people will argue today that Jews aren't white. Some people will argue that they are. To me, I take a historical position. I think earlier in American history, it's accurate to not describe Jews as white. But I think increasingly after World War II, Jews have entered, mainstream quote unquote whiteness, along with other ethnic groups that previously weren't considered white. So it's an evolving category. So I think what Whoopi is here doing is she's using the idiom of 2022, where many people understand. So I would say probably the majority position that Jews are white, in that they are mostly moved through the world as people who the structures of whiteness influence their lives in a particular way. She's just doing that. Now, the problem is when you're talking about the Jews that Hitler murdered and annihilated in the Holocaust, I don't think you could say that they were white in the way that she means it. Also, whiteness means a different thing in pre-World War II European, the pre-World War II European context than it does in the American context. But also, like, the valence of what she's saying isn't quite right. The Jews weren't quite of the majoritarian population, and they were annihilated for being identified as a distinct racial minority. So this is the problem. There's two different languages, there's two different discourses fighting, and Whoopi, who is not a historian of Europe, isn't aware of this sort of other idiom. But it doesn't sound like she means it in like a vicious anti-Semitic way.
No, she doesn't. No.
Yeah.
Although the thing earlier was like, two white people, like white people, you fight it, y'all fight among yourselves. That was a little bit.
I don't remember that. Right, because she's saying because that denies the history.
I mean, this is white people doing it to white people.
Yeah.
So this is y'all go fight amongst yourselves, but don't
Well, and look at what.
As a kind of a canard to throw you off from the fact that they don't like history that makes white people look bad.
Well, this is white people doing it to white people.
Yeah.
So this is y'all go fight amongst yourselves, but don't
Well, and look
to make it.
I'm not sure
the
that
kind
they
of like y'all fight it out. That is what's interesting is we'll talk about this
not
shortly.
About race. It's not about
What
race.
is it about?
Right. For her race is black and white. That's how, that's what she's
because
talking about.
that's the United
American,
States of 2022.
Right. Yes.
It wasn't the United States of 1920, but it is the United States of
man's
2022.
inhumanity to man. That's what it's about.
But it's about white supremacy. It's about
but
going
it's
after
not. It's
Jews
not about
ideal race.
But these are two
Romas.
white groups of people. It's a
And
problem.
Katie,
It
could you
doesn't
pause
matter.
for a second?
Yeah, of
This
course.
is also a big thing in Holocaust memory, right? The question is, to what degree do you want to make the Holocaust exceptional, and to what degree do you want to universalize it as a human experience? And I think that the figure of Anne Frank is very interesting here, because there was criticism, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, of the Anne Frank Museum and Amsterdam is about essentially departicularizing Anne herself by making it like a story of human resilience and the human overcoming, where critics of that were essentially like, by departicularizing Anne, you're actually dehistoricizing what was happening. She was killed because she was a Jew. She was hiding because she was a Jew. So there and there are, you know, very sophisticated discussions around this. And so what Whoopi is, I think, doing,
find on The View,
which you won't find on The View, but Whoopi is essentially partaking in that universalizing discourse, right, which is very popular in the 80s and the 90s. As Holocaust memory becomes a much more popular thing, and particularly in the 1990s, the Holocaust is like this exceptional event that the American empire will no longer allow to happen, right? She's articulating a sort of this discourse of the 1990s unconsciously.
Right. It is universalizing, but I also think it's, it is universalizing. It's a little presentist. And it also, I don't think it takes into account the racialized nature of anti-Semitism. But that's
it's not historically accurate. If you were studying this in 1935, of course, the Nuremberg laws were passed because the Jews were considered a particular race.
Right.
This is really the realm of Holocaust memory, though, which is what Spiegel, which Mouse is. It's a disquisition on Holocaust memory.
Yes. Disquisition, exactly the word that I was reaching for.
Black or white, because black, white, Jews, everybody eats each other. So is it?
Okay, that's good.
If you're uncomfortable, if you hear about Mouse, should you be worried? Should your child say, "Oh my God, I wonder if that's me"? No, that's not what they're going to say. They're going to say, "I don't want to."
Are they playing her off? Is that what that is?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Well,
want to be cruel.
Most kids, they don't want to be cruel.
No, they don't. And we're living in an era where people are comparing vaccine cards to the yellow stars, where people are comparing vaccinations to what Anne Frank went through. Yeah. So it is necessary for kids to learn about the Holocaust.
I was about man's inhumanity to man, however it exposes itself. I have to cut you off.
I just want to say
not just universalizing, but very much saying
it's top 20 of Amazon's rules last week.
Saying that it's not a race issue, right? She's not just universalizing it. She's saying this is not a racism issue.
She's basically, the way that I read this is that the real motivation for Whoopi is the universalizing it. And then the second step is to universalize it for some reason, means to make it not about race, because she's applying this American idiom in this particular context.
Well, I think she's also trying to elevate the white on black racism, or kind of do almost like exceptionalize that as something that's separate. And that's fine. It is different. But I think what my sense is that she really is invested in that being a separate and different thing from the kind of bigotry or hatred that was behind the Holocaust.
Because in some sense, I think it's interesting, because on one level, she's making the universalizing move with the Holocaust. And then on the other level, like you're suggesting, she's particularizing the racial hatreds of the United States, which, you know, makes sense for a Black woman who grew up in a particular time in a particular place, you know. So this is it does not seem vicious to me, is what I'm saying. I don't think Whoopi Goldberg is being anti-Semitic.
No, but she was slammed as such, and you know, everyone from the ADL to
the ADL.
Yeah, I know the ADL, which is, I mean, I think I've been smeared. I hope I've been smeared by them. May they, from my lips to God's ears, may they smear me. They've definitely gone after Matt Taibbi. The ADL, we've talked about this before on the show with Ali Abunimah. They're not an anti-Semitism group. They are an Israel lobby group, basically, that equates all criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism.
And the thing that I think is important for young Jews like us is to make clear that that organization doesn't speak for us, you know, and that's a move that they often try to make, which is that they speak for all of American Jewry. And there's, I think, an interesting generational divide in the Jewish community right now that we could go into if you want, but is very important.
Well, let's play what then that was just one part of it. Then Whoopi went on Colbert and offered this kind of apology, not apology. Okay, and that was the first part of the video that Daniel and I looked at. The rest of that discussion is on, guess where, guys? It's on Patreon. It's on patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show, and that's where we look at the actual thing that she said on the Colbert Report. But that's our discussion of her initial comments that were made, And then in the Patreon only part, we do indeed go over her apology, her kind of like non-apology to Jews that she issued on the Colbert Report. But honestly, first of all, if you're just joining us, thank you so much for watching. Please like the stream. Just do a thumbs up. It takes no effort, and you're helping the stream and you're helping the show. And we have someone who we're going to talk to more about this with. And in fact, I think we're going to look at a Whoopi Goldberg tweet. That'll be an interesting thing to look at. But we're bringing onto the stream. You know her, you love her. She's the best. She's from the Bad Faith podcast, former press secretary for Bernard Sanders, the inimitable Briahna Joy Gray. Hi, Bri. How are you?
Hi, Katie. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming.
It's my pleasure, truly.
Yay. Well, we love having you here. Your setup looks great as usual. And I just wanted to, get into, we could talk about whatever you want to talk about. We can talk about the politics of the day, what you're thinking about, what makes you tick, but we can also talk a little bit more about this Whoopi story. I think that we can just take a look at her apology, that she addressed her statements in a tweet. She, by the way, it's nice to have friends in high places. As Daniel and I discussed, she obviously was able to get a spot on the Colbert Report, like the same day that this happened, which is
I
great.
didn't realize that. I'm very curious to see what she said there.
Yeah, well, we can watch it. I can show it to you if you want. We could do that.
I'd love to see it.
All right, you'll love to see it. We got to show it to you. All right, let's do it. I think, is it in this one? We may not have uploaded it, but we can easily upload it. Brad's going to upload it.
Hey, Brad.
Hey, Brad.
Web. Please welcome back.
Oh no, sorry, not our discussion of it, Brad. Like the actual video that's in the other StreamYard thing. How long will that take, or should I just, because we have it? Tyler sent it on. I have the link. I can just do it in Stream Share. Just let me know which one is easier to do. Bradley. Private chat. Let's see. Gonna need a few minutes. Okay, so why don't I just go play that then while you upload that? It's really annoying that you can't have something uploaded into StreamYard in multiple things. Let's see, 1 second. Why did someone wrote G Diddy? Why do only Ashkenazi Jews claim that Jewishness is a race? Is there a white supremacist agenda attached to associating Jewishness with Europeans? Okay, that question isn't really based in anything empirical. I don't know. First of all, I don't know if your point is that Mizrahi Jews, i.e. non-Ashkenazi Jews, don't say it's about race, but Ashkenazim do? Or is your point that it's only Ashkenazi Jews who say it's about race and non-Jews don't? So G Diddy, let me know, because I'm staying with this question. Because I think it's kind
I didn't realize there was any kind of split.
Oh yeah, there's Ashkenazi Jews and
I mean, with respect to who conceives of Jewishness as a race versus, I don't know.
Oh right, I didn't either. That's what I'm asking him about. I'm hoping he's going to chime in because I don't actually know what that's a reference to. That's interesting, but well, what's it? Yeah, I'm not sure. Let me know, G Ditto. Who is that? G Diddy. But anyway, let's see. I do want to read this. Anyone read The Invention of the Jewish People by Shlomo Sand that kind of addresses this? No, I need to read it. Yes. Tyler, could you text me or put in the private chat the link to the longer video that you found? Bree's makeup always puts me to shame. I mean, Bree's natural face.
You know what?
That's kind of a robe.
It is. I gotta say, I really appreciate a couple of things about Whoopi. I gotta say, before we get into all of our myriad criticism of Whoopi, I just gotta put out there that she is the star of my favorite all-time movie. A great testament of what comes from the power of uniting Black and Jewish friendships together.
Sister Act.
No, The Color Purple. Right. Steven Spielberg,
right? It's true.
Quincy Jones, Whoopi Goldberg, symbiotic.
It's true.
Cultural product. And additionally, I will say I gotta respect a woman who just creates her entirely distinct own sense of style that bulks all cultural expectations of how women have to present themselves in the public, and does her own thing. I mean, like, it takes chutzpah. Katie.
It does. It does take chutzpah, yes. Just gotta pause it there because of, like, for among other reasons, fair use, so we don't get kicked off the stream. But you take a while. I'll just process that because I know you're I don't want to get in the way. You know, it's gonna sound passive aggressive, but I don't mean it passive aggressively. I literally don't want it to get in the way of you're enjoying a bite.
Sorry.
I don't know how to. No, don't apologize. It's one of those things where you really can't say it in a way, like I have to do like hashtag sincere voice.
I didn't hear it as passive aggressive.
Okay,
it's
good.
on me thinking I could grab a bite of my quinoa bowl.
You should. I'm happy. This is a quinoa friendly place, and we really take, we value nutrition. And quinoa. Wait, is quinoa the problematic thing? That comes from like Peru in some way.
I don't know where they grow quinoa.
Well, it's honestly, that's on the anti-quinoa movement. That's on them. Just like you're taking responsibility, they need to raise a ruckus because I barely can keep up with it. So we got to find out.
I know is that I recently found out that I can make quinoa in my rice cooker, and all bets are off.
All bets are off. Yeah, it's a game changer. Bree for Supreme Court, by the way, someone said. I think Bree said that too. So
I saw what was it? Was it Ben Shapiro? Somebody who tweeted that it should be Candace Owens, and I was thinking, no, it should be the Candace Owens of the left.
Yes, definitely. I mean, they got it. I think even Ben Shapiro would admit that would make more sense, right? He knows that Biden's not going to go with Candace Owens. So
I can think of a few things I'd like to do less than return to any form of legal work, no matter how highly esteemed
or powerful.
Does this whole thing with Whoopi Goldberg boil down to her not understand, having a kind of a narrow understanding of race that excludes Jewish people or any group that is now considered to be white in a contemporary context?
I think you basically nailed it on the head. I think that's it. Yes, I do. I think that's what it is. And what's interesting is she wrote this tweet she wrote this tweet before going on the Colbert Report. She said, on today's show, I said the Holocaust is not about, quote, is not about race, but about man's inhumanity to man, end quote. I should have said it is about both. As Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League shared, this quote, the Holocaust was about the Nazi systematic annihilation of the Jewish people, who they deemed to be an inferior race, end quote. I stand corrected. The Jewish people around the world have always had my support, and that will never waver. I'm sorry for the hurt I have caused. Written with my sincerest apologies, Whoopi Goldberg. But the thing is, like, what she's saying there is that she stands corrected because Jewish people were deemed, here, let me screen share this, were deemed to be another race. Which is, I mean, everyone knows that, right? I don't think that that's up for interpretation.
I think you might be overly optimistic when you say everybody knows that.
Okay, right. Well, didn't the Nazis? Okay, so here's the quote. Ready? On today's show, I said the Holocaust is not about race, but about man's inhumanity to man. I should have said it is about both. As Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL shared, the Holocaust was about the Nazi systematic annihilation of the Jewish people, who they deemed to be an inferior race. I stand corrected. The Jewish people. Okay. But this is the part that what do people think that they just didn't like Jews because they I'm not even being sarcastic. Is the idea that they didn't consider Jews an inferior race, that they just didn't like them?
I think that she probably thought it was religion.
Okay.
Like,
right. That's, yes.
Catholics or whatever who are fully, white.
Right.
I think that, it would be more clear if she had thrown religion in there. It's weird that this whole conversation managed to be had without anybody even saying, instead of man's inhumanity against man,
right.
Christian.
Well, that's right. That's, yes.
Or something like that. It's a little weird that didn't come up at all, but I kind of maybe too charitably presume that that's what she meant and that she just understood Jews, specifically as a religious identity and not a racial identity.
That's okay. Right. So there's that now, but what's interesting is that, like, I always push back on that because I'm someone who identifies as Jewish, but I'm not religious. So I push back on that definition. But I always thought that people got that for the Nazis, that they grouped Jews as a different race. Yeah.
I don't know, man.
German.
Maybe this didn't come up when she was hanging out with Mel Gibson
Oh yeah, to be fair, she did. Yes, she's a Wait, how come this didn't come up? She's a big Mel Gibson defender. I forgot about that part. She has Mel Gibson blood on her hands. Wow.
Yeah. This is, look,
Bree, you are connecting the dots. Wow.
Here's the thing. I have followed every single one of Whoopi Goldberg's missteps because I am a fan.
Yeah. She was great in Ghost also.
It hurts me deeply every time there's a moment like this. Because if I haven't been clear enough about it, The Color Purple from the fall of 1985 is the best film, in my humble opinion, that has ever been made.
I'm going to tell you a secret. What? I've never seen The Color Purple, so I'm going to have to watch it.
Rose Halper.
I know.
WTF? How?
I know. Now I need to for Black-Jewish relations, if for no other reason.
This is a hate crime. This is anti-Black.
Yes. I mean, it's anti-Semitic too, though.
Yes.
It's both. Yeah.
This is Spielberg's best work.
All right, I will watch it. I'm gonna watch it by this quarter, this semester. I will watch it.
It's on Netflix.
It's on Netflix. All right, forget about it. I will definitely watch it. Yeah. Guys, please hit that like. Please hit that share. We're almost at 1,000 views, so we want to get those 10 viewers, and it'll be a boon for me and Bree, for Blacks and Jews and Black-Jewish relations all over the world. As soon as I said that, it went down by 10. So you're all a bunch of anti-Semites and racists. She underestimates a little bit how known it was that people were Jewish. Whether it's last name, depending on when we're talking about historically, last name, where they lived, how they dressed. And then there's, of course, all those tropes about what Jews look like, which is an awkward thing to talk about because you don't want to really invest in that. But there certainly was the idea that there were certain traits.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we just had this conversation a couple months ago on the podcast with Thomas Chatterton Williams about like this idea of racecraft and whether Black people kind of, submitting to the one drop rule and having, mixed race people identifying as Black out of a sense of cultural pride and a way to reclaim something from the one drop rule is just perpetuating the one drop rule. And, he wrote his book about whether now that he's had a child with a white woman and he's half white, half Black, and his child looks fully white, that challenged his identification as Black and made him question why we do that. And it's a really interesting and kind of provocative conversation. It just strikes me that in the course of that conversation, Black people, there's no real hesitation when we talk about being able to identify somebody as Black, even someone who's only half Black, like Thomas Chatterton Williams. It's clearly you're Black. This isn't a question. No one's, if he were to walk around saying I am white, people would laugh, and people in fact do. His book is called Diary of an Ex-Black Man or whatever it's called, and some people snark at the idea that he would ever be able to identify as anything other than Black. So it's interesting to have this other version of a conversation where it's awkward to talk about what it means to quote unquote look Jewish when there's no hesitation about what it means to look Black. It's quite the opposite. It's hilarity to suggest that someone who even has liminal features, whatever that means, looks anything other than completely Black.
Right. I mean, it's a little tricky because it kind of is what would people say? Some people would say about me, people could debate whether or not I look Jewish, right? And no one would debate whether you're Black.
No, and I said this to Thomas Chatterton Williams, and his rejoinder was, well, in certain parts of the world, they have different kind of interim categories in South Africa or Brazil or whatever. Yeah. And different kinds of Black, people who are Black in America would fall in one of those other categories, and they would scoff. I have, friends who are mixed race, Haitians and other kinds of people, lighter skinned Blacks who kind of balk at the idea that in America, they don't attempt to make any distinction between themselves and, the rest of us melanated, kinky haired folk.
Right. Right.
Yeah. It's a non-apology.
We can call it a non-apology. Yeah.
I mean, I think on some level she still thinks this feels very much like Warren apologizing for the Native American stuff. It feels very much like she is race means being not white. Being of a race means being not white. Jews are white, Italians are white, whatever now today. And I will not submit to the notion that there are anything else.
Yes.
I wish somebody maybe had pushed her a little bit into a conversation about whether she thinks that, Jews and Italians and other people who were not previously considered to be white were white, at least in a historical context, even if she has trouble with it today.
Today, right.
And also I wish Colbert, I know he's made it very clear that he's neither Black nor Jewish. He really drew very clear lines to stand there. Yeah. But I wish he still were capable of kind of pushing her to interrogate whether or not her presumptions about folks being able to be identified as Jewish are as obvious as she thinks it is. I'm recalling also this moment we had on the podcast where I interviewed a former Nazi, and he was talking about the process of him being recruited as a kid in an alley, and he, I think, is Italian, and the Nazi recruiter came up to him and like asked him his last name because he's like, dark haired,
right, had to make sure,
here,
yeah.
And once he heard the Italian last name, then he's like, okay, recruitment is on, you're allowed.
Right.
But the reason you're asking his last name is because you got to double check that he's not Jewish.
Yes.
And he may or may not have felt the need to do that if he had presented it a little differently, a little bit more
Goyish, waspier, yeah.
Right. Which is not to say that there's not plenty of Jewish people who look.
Yeah. And it's also not to say that white Jews don't have white privilege. This is what I think that people can't have in their head at the same time. Like being Jewish walking through the world is very different from being Black and walking through this world. And at the same time, for Hitler and for anti-Semites and anti-Semitism, which was alive and well before Hitler and manifested in many ways, including pogroms, which people would be, Jews would be wiped out or have to flee to avoid being wiped out. It wasn't about whether or not you prayed. It was very much, there was a whole language about genetics, about phrenology, about features, we were vermin-like. And I don't think that disrupts the idea that anti-Black racism is unique. Like those two things can exist at the same time. And I really wish she would have been pushed to acknowledge that.
This zero sum.
Yes, that's what it is.
Problem for everybody.
Yeah, it really is a real problem for everyone. Exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Zero sum. Yeah, the oppression Olympics. Yeah. Zero sum identity politics. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Yes, but by that argument, sorry, what'd you say?
What is about to happen?
All right, let's play it. Let's keep playing that. See, what's problematic about this is that she's accepting, as much as she loves to claim that race is a construct, she's actually very much reifying the concept of race.
Yes.
Because slaveholders weren't lying, apparently, right? When they talk about race.
Yes. What race has meant, what white has meant, has changed over history. And she's just not able to process that. Right. And this is what was so interesting. I know a lot of people did not like that Thomas Chatterton Williams interview, but this is what I find so provocative about his statement, because there is a way that what Whoopi is doing right now is very, very common insofar as it accepts as true because of the political weight of understanding race today. It accepts as true the racial constructs that are born out of racial oppression, that are invented by people who only came up with those contracts to oppress. But now we have reclaimed them in various ways. We rely on the census information in order to argue that various groups and constituencies need protection and all of this kind of stuff. And so in some ways, it's the member of these racial groups that are now more committed to that racecraft than the people who invented these categories in order to persecute people in the first instance. And that's what Whoopi is doing here. I understand where she's coming from, because we all have grown up in this world where to deny the existence of race is specifically a kind of a white Black or white Latino or white Asian or white, other than white dynamic in America is to deny racism and to deny the need for equality measures and interventions from the federal government, et cetera. But in this context, it really reveals the extent to which we do racecraft. We are committed perhaps beyond the limits of racial equity to concepts that we say are ephemeral. We acknowledge it's a social construct, but we are committed to for various reasons, some of which I empathize with. And I talked to I talked to Thomas Chatterton Williams about this. Like, I am have this attachment to my Blackness, and I'm willing to interrogate that with you, but like, I want to be honest about that. And so, on some level, I empathize with Whoopi, but also it's like, I need you to at least be able to digest the historical perspective shift that has occurred in the last 60, 80 years.
Right.
When it comes to various groups being considered to be white.
Yes. I mean, it's weird because it's not like the Holocaust didn't happen. I mean, I understand saying this like pre-Holocaust or something, that you don't really think there's a race thing here, but there so clearly was an entire project based on Jews being a different, being vermin or being subhuman.
Yeah, I think that she fully would be. It's crazy to me that still at this point nobody has said the word religion. But I bet you if they did, Whoopi would say, "Oh yeah, they're being persecuted specifically because they're Jewish, and Jewishness is a religion." But that race, ethnicity, religious slippage is causing all the trouble here. It seems.
Which then I would then of course swoop in and be like, "It's not just religion," because Nazis didn't care how religious you were. And that's what's also weird. That's like kind of like the Jewish counterpart to what you were saying, which is that for me, like part of my definition as being Jewish is someone at the receiving end of anti-Semitism. Like that shapes Jewish identity for me. I don't receive it now. I don't live in it, but my family did, and that shaped their identity and what they dedicated themselves to, and it shaped where they lived. Right? It shaped like they didn't have to, not because they were political. I mean, some of them were political. I have relatives who were became partisans and killed Nazis, and there's a monument to them apparently somewhere I have to go visit at some point. But then just people literally just living certain places, or then when they left Europe.
It still shapes your life, Katie. I mean, there's probably a reason, the same reason you don't really want to move to the middle of Oklahoma is the reason I don't really want to move.
Guys, if you're watching this live, right? If you're watching this live, you're so lucky because you get this entire stream. You got to see this entire stream. If you're watching this later and you want to see the rest of this stream where Bri talks a lot about the color purple, what else do they get? See really Bri kind of unplugged. Then make sure you become Patreon supporters at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. So you guys, what I'm talking about. You guys who have been here live, you know how fun it gets. It gets a little off the hook, a little informal.